Our feet are capable of so much. We can balance on them, we can climb, we can jump, we can run. There's so many things that our feet can be used for, and it's pretty amazing if you ask me. Like 25% of the bones in our body are in our feet. We also have a bunch of bones, ligaments, muscles, and tendons in our feet. I don't think we're giving them the appreciation that we should a lot of the time. And I was definitely in that boat. I definitely did not really think about my feet very much until I started to have issues with my feet. And I started to learn a little bit and hear a little bit and experiment a little bit. And I ended up kind of falling down this barefoot shoe, minimalist shoe rabbit hole. And I have found that they are very helpful for me. So what I thought I would do is just share basically a comprehensive video about barefoot shoes from my experience, some of the things that I've found along the way, how I got into barefoot shoes, how I trained my feet leading up to it, some of the things that I do for my feet now, and just general findings that I've had over the past few years. I'm two years into this journey. This is not health advice. I'm just sharing my experiences. And I'm also not an expert in regards to foot anatomy. So definitely just take what I say with a grain of salt. So I will be talking about studies in this video and showing some. I will have them linked in my description if you want to read further. I may not take enough time on the screen for you to read everything for these things because I'm trying to keep it up with what I'm saying. But just feel free to pause if you want. And I just want to acknowledge that the participant numbers are honestly way lower than I would like for a lot of these studies. A lot of these are, there may be connections, there may be associations, but I truthfully do think we're really lacking in the studies that are done on feet. I think that there is definitely room for improvement. So just to clarify, when I am talking about a barefoot shoe or a minimal shoe or a minimalist shoe, I am talking about the same type of shoe. I am talking about a shoe that has been designed to allow your feet to move more naturally, more the way that they would if we were not wearing shoes. Realistically, we live in a world where we do need to wear shoes at times for hygienic reasons, for just societally accepted reasons, for like the ground being too hard kind of reasons. I know there is a movement of people who really advocate for wearing no shoes at all a lot. But I don't think that is a very approachable place for most people, or very realistic for a lot of people. So barefoot shoes are basically an in-between where they allow us to have some protection from our feet, some cushioning for our feet, and also some ability to enter stores and other places of business, etc., without getting kicked out. So there are a few components to barefoot shoes that kind of set them apart from a lot of other shoes. One of them being zero drop heel, so no elevation change from the heel to the toe. A lot of shoes do have a heel on them, and that does change the way things are lined up in our bodies. No elevation between the heel and the toe or a neutral elevation is something that allows for full range of motion in a lot of the joints of the body. Ultra is a brand that makes shoes that are kind of in between. They're not quite fully barefoot shoes or minimalist shoes, but they do have zero or low drop shoes, and they also do tend to have wider toe boxes. And then we also have the aspects of the sole, which are usually a little bit more thin and flexible. So they do allow for your feet to feel more of the ground. So just to get some of that sensory feedback, to be able to actually kind of feel what you are walking on. And then we've also got the toe box. So on this, you might be able to kind of tell the toe box looks a little bit different. This one, I would say it's a little easier to see. Like the toe box does look a little different from a regular shoe, where things are a little bit more pointed. This one's not even that bad. A lot of shoes, you have that point here, and then we're smushing our toes in here. Whereas with a barefoot shoe, we're kind of intending it to be more foot shaped so that your toes have room to extend and spread as necessary. There are a few other aspects that can make a shoe a little better as a barefoot shoe than others that aren't necessarily like within this criteria. So for example, with like a flip-flop, you may have that flexibility, you may have some room for your toes, and you also may have pretty much no drop. You might have a flat shoe, but the muscles required in your feet to keep the shoe on, especially with a flip-flop, you kind of have to grab with your toes. So those typically are not like classified as a barefoot shoe, even though they kind of seem to fit the criteria. So I have seen Katie Bowman, for example, add a few extra criteria for what she classifies as like a good barefoot shoe. One being that the upper of the shoe fully connects the foot to the shoe so that there's no need to grip the toes or the front of the shin to keep that shoe on. So with a flip-flop, that would cut that out. And the other thing is that the front of the shoe rests on the ground and doesn't swoop upwards. You might sort of be able to see it with this, like there's a lot of shoes that will kind of have the toe bit kind of go up, which can obviously change the dynamics of how your feet are hanging out. I would say there's some inconsistencies with some brands and like what they prioritize the most in a barefoot shoe, but these are generally the criteria that most barefoot shoes would have. So if I had to kind of trace how I got into barefoot shoes, I think a lot of it started with me having foot issues. About 4 years ago, I started to have plantar fasciitis, or what presented as plantar fasciitis. I did not get this diagnosed, but based on how I was feeling and the presentation of plantar fasciitis, it sounded a lot like it. I noticed that when I was getting up from sitting, I would have a very sharp pain kind of in my foot, and it would go away after like walking for a bit, but that initial bit was quite an uncomfortable bit of pain, and I would notice it like pretty much every time I was getting up. So I did end up looking into some ways to help that. I talked to some people. I had a coworker who had also dealt with plantar fasciitis. I got insoles. I also tried like compression socks that are meant for plantar fasciitis, and those things did kind of help, but I also started to think about when I was noticing the pain in my feet. And that specifically seemed to be occurring in the summer. I had been wearing like flats and Oxford shoes, and both of those had quite a rigid sole. I think that most of them also had like a heel, and they were also compressing my feet. I noticed that if my foot kind of healed up, if I was feeling okay and then I wore those flats, or if I wore those Oxford shoes, I would notice kind of within that day, my feet would start to have that pain again. So I started to kind of think about, maybe my footwear is a little bit connected to what I was feeling. I did not initially go the route of barefoot shoes. So initially I got kind of into more of the cushioned shoes. At some point, I stumbled upon Kizik's, which are not a shoe that's like meant for plantar fasciitis, but they are kind of a wider shoe, and they also seem to have like a really nice cushion. So I thought, okay, they might be good for my foot issues that I was having. And I got these in 2022 and they were the Limas. And I really liked these shoes. And what I liked about them was that I could actually feel the ground. Not all of the ground because they do have a pretty big cushion, but I was able to like feel if I was walking on like a round surface, or if I was walking on something that had a little texture, I could feel that through my shoes and it felt really good. That was one of the things that I loved the most about these shoes. So it kind of got me thinking a little bit about like how I do like to feel the ground beneath my feet. I got those Kizik's in the summer of 2022, and towards the spring summer of 2023 was when I started to get really interested in barefoot shoes. I had heard about barefoot shoes from a few different sources. I had also read a few books that mentioned walking barefoot or walking in minimal shoes. So it started to really stick into my mind that, this might be something for me to try. When I was at the point of like considering this stuff, the plantar fasciitis had pretty much stopped being an issue for me, but I have been motivated to try to prevent issues like that from happening in the future. If you look at like what the recommendations are for plantar fasciitis, it's pretty much the opposite of minimalist shoes. It's basically having a lot of cushioning, it's having arch support, it's having sometimes a bit of a heel, and those things may help to rest your feet for sure. So I do want to make that clear that I'm not saying that's totally wrong, but I do think strengthening our feet could be a very beneficial thing. There are some studies that have shown things like that strengthening our feet may help plantar fasciitis. There was a study that showed that working on foot strengthening while also working on foot stretches for plantar fasciitis seemed to result in a faster relief. There was also a study that looked at walking barefoot on a treadmill versus walking in shoes on a treadmill, and these people had persistent plantar heel pain, and the people who were walking barefoot on the treadmill had better outcomes overall. They both had improved outcomes just from walking, but the ones who walked barefoot had a more significant improvement. There's also been studies that have shown that barefoot shoes do help to strengthen feet, that they also may change the shape of our feet, change our arches. So there's a few things that kind of line up to look like they might be beneficial together for our foot health. And I also really liked the idea of strengthening my feet to maybe help my foot health in the long term. So I did decide to start transitioning into barefoot shoes after just basically reaching a point where I had heard enough that convinced me, and based on how I knew I felt with those Kizik's. So the Kizik's kind of acted as a transitional shoe for me because I acknowledged that I like to feel the ground beneath my feet. I like to have a little bit more room for my feet, and the Kizik's had a little bit of a wider toe box than some shoes do. Again, not even that the toe box that I had was huge by any means, but it was bigger than some. And I also felt like the heel wasn't that big at that time. Now in retrospect, it does feel high to me, but at the time I was like, oh, this is a really good transition shoe because I can still feel some of the ground. I can feel like there's hardly any heel on here, and I also have a decent amount of space for my feet. So I initially just started training my feet for barefoot shoes before I even got barefoot shoes. So I found rocks for free where people were just getting rid of landscaped rocks. I was using those as foot exercises to kind of help with my feet just getting used to feeling more and dealing with different shapes for them to accommodate. While I was going on a walk, I would try to just take off my shoes for a little bit and just walk barefoot across a shorter portion of the walk, just to get my feet kind of adjusted to it. So after trying to strengthen my feet, I did find a place that I could try on barefoot shoes and buy them. I tried the Vivo Barefoots, the Primus All-Weather Trail, and I found the transition quite easy with that shoe because there was a decent amount of cushioning. So I tried that, kind of fell in love with it, and wore that shoe all the time. I tried to pack an extra pair of shoes with me while I was just getting used to them, but I did not find that I often needed to use them. So I had those basically as my daily driver shoe. I know you're supposed to rotate shoes, but that's rich people shit. I only had the one pair. That was the only pair that I could really access. And Vivo Barefoot shoes are way too expensive. So yeah, I wore those pretty much every day until winter when I was crap, I need boots. Once I was in for the winter, I was I can't go back to regular boots because they just don't feel right. My body does not feel right in regular boots anymore. Fortunately, I was able to find myself a pair of minimal style boots. And then a few months after that, I went to a music festival, and this music festival, I was okay, I'm going to bring my Kizik's because they have more cushioning. And if you're standing on standing inside on a concrete surface basically. So knowing that that was what I was going to be standing on, I knew my feet were probably going to be sore in that situation. So I was like, okay, I'll wear these Kizik's because I need the extra cushioning. And I had like such weird knee pain from just standing with these shoes on. And as I had brought my barefoot shoes with me, I switched into those shoes during like a little break, and instantly I felt a difference in my knees. Like I was like, wow, my feet are going to be sore, but my knees, instant relief. So just that alone, I'm like, wow, it's so interesting how like something like the heel of this shoe, which I think is what caused that knee pain, like how I used to think that wasn't much of a heel. I used to think that that wasn't really impacting my body that much, but because I kind of adjusted my body so much to the barefoot shoes, I'm like, wow, no, that was actually like putting pressures and strains on my body in places that I was not even thinking about. There are these connections that are going upwards through our body. And I think that's something we should be kind of mindful of. So yeah, I have since kind of been hugely sold on these barefoot minimalist shoes. I also have a few pairs of shoes that I do make exceptions for that are not barefoot shoes. So I do have a couple of pairs of like Birkenstock style shoes, and those I got back when I was struggling with the plantar fasciitis because they were supposedly very good for sufferers of plantar fasciitis. And I do find that I like them for like if I'm standing inside, so say I'm like doing a lot of cooking, or if I'm standing in the kitchen for a long amount of time, they do just give like that cushioning effect. And I basically have one pair that I had already kind of set aside as slippers. And then I have my other pair that I will use for outdoor stuff if I'm like not walking and I just want to like throw a pair of flip-flops on basically. I do have one other pair of flip-flops as well that are like very thin soled, not great. In terms of like foot health, flip-flops are not really recommended. And I did notice, like I tried doing a walk around the block in Birkenstocks maybe a year ago, and my calves really hurt. So I did notice that I can't wear these things for very long, but if I'm just like doing something quick in and out, or for like foot recovery. So if I have been walking a lot, say outside on concrete for the day and I'm just like resting, I do have like a few things that I'll do for foot recovery, and sometimes like throwing on Birkenstocks if you're still gonna have to like stand to do something, that I do find sometimes helps. And then I do have this pair of shoes that I had from like a while ago. They're just like Merrill, I don't know what these are called. Not a huge heel. And they do have like the straps and stuff. So I do find I can tolerate wearing these. So I'm not getting rid of them because I have not found like a good barefoot sandal anywhere that I could try. So sandals wise, I will make exceptions a little bit. And I generally am not gonna like go hiking in sandals. I'm generally gonna wear shoes for that. So I'm not a total purist by any means, and I don't think you should like throw out all your shoes. And I do still have these Kizik's, mostly just because I can just pop into them. So let's say if I had to really quickly take garbage out or something, I have that option. But generally, I do not wear them anymore. I got rid of like all of my other shoes pretty much. So I had like some shoes that had a little bit more of a heel, like cute boots and stuff. Yeah, I have just given up caring about footwear being cute because I have like so little choice. I really just don't care anymore. Like as long as they fit me and they feel good, I'm so far past caring about the aesthetic of them. I'm just wearing shoes for being shoes. I do have a few other things that I also do for my feet that I think have helped. So I do have these like My Happy Feet socks. They're just like socks with like a toe spreader basically in them. Basically getting our feet back to how they would typically operate is my understanding. Basically our shoes, we're so used to having our shoes and our feet being compressed, that it is kind of good to disperse our toes. And it's not something that necessarily comes naturally to us after the way we've been living. So I have tried the Correct Toes toe spreaders that are supposed to be really great. They are designed by a sports podiatrist, and they're designed to be like worn inside shoes. I just found they were really uncomfortable for me, the way that they sat in my toes. I don't know if I just like had the wrong size, but I did not love them. They're like a silicone kind of thing, and you can put them kind of between your socks, stuff like that. But I didn't totally love that. So these I find a lot more comfortable. They're not designed to be worn like during the day for like walking around. I typically wear them after I've been on my feet for quite a while, if I've been hiking or walking a ton. You can wear them to sleep, but they are very irritating when you wake up and need to just yank them off. I don't think I've ever been able to sleep like a whole night with them. Usually like maybe a couple of hours, and then you're just gonna wake up and want to yank them off. Also, like I mentioned earlier, I got a bunch of rocks that I will just sometimes like do little like movements with my foot on these rocks, just to kind of get my feet moving in different ways. And sometimes I'll do like little balance exercises on rocks. I really like them for just playing around with my feet, playing around with my balance. And you can often find them for free. I also have this, I think it's a lacrosse ball that I will use to like massage my foot sometimes. This feels really nice. I think I got that back when I was having like the plantar fasciitis stuff, but I still do that. There's also other foot exercises that I could be more diligent with that I definitely don't do that much anymore. But Katie Bowman is probably the resource that I would recommend for that stuff. She is a biomechanist who has written like 2 books on barefoot shoes or on foot stuff, and she shows a lot of different exercises and has good little diagrams and really explains things in a very nice, approachable way. So highly recommend if you want a little bit more tips in terms of exercises to do with your feet. I also do have toe socks, which like I think are kind of recommended for just helping you to have your feet be able to splay more, because if you think about like how, again, talking about toe spread, with the traditional socks, you're kind of still compressing your foot. And I have found that like a very compressed sock will cause me to have foot discomfort later in the day, basically, if I've been wearing them all day. But standard socks that aren't super tight, I am okay with. However, I do have a few pairs of toe socks that I will usually reserve for days where I know I'm going to be on my feet more. Just especially if I'm like going on a hike or something, then I'll try and wear the toe socks. Toe socks are just so expensive, so I don't have a lot of them. A lot of these exercise things, these foot care things, are tips that I would have for you if you are transitioning to barefoot shoes or if you're considering it. But I'm going to just dive into a few more tips that I would have for anyone who is trying to get into barefoot shoes. So I also would highly suggest making sure to transition slowly. That is what pretty much every source will tell you. Do not rush this. Do not go from all a heavy heeled shoe to all barefoot shoes. Depending on what you have been wearing beforehand, it may take some time for your feet to get accustomed. My transition to barefoot shoes probably took less time than, for example, someone who was wearing stilettos for like 30 years straight kind of thing. So just be mindful of the fact that all of our histories are different, all of our bodies are different, and we also have different recovery times, different times for our body to adapt. And I don't think you should be like comparing yourself to someone else's timeline. Just listen to your body, how your feet are feeling, and don't push yourself. So my experience in this video is as a person who walks. I'm not really a runner. If you are planning on running, make sure that you are taking time to build up those foot muscles first. There have been some studies that show that going right into running with barefoot shoes can possibly lead to more likelihood of injury. They did a study that showed an increase in bone marrow edema for people who were running with barefoot shoes compared to the control group running without barefoot shoes, with kind of regular shoes. So this study that suggested forefoot striking in minimal shoes to reduce running injuries did suggest, even prior to transitioning the strike, doing a strengthening program that includes exercises to address the calf muscles and the intrinsic and extrinsic muscles of the feet. And another thing is, don't be surprised if you do feel a little different in even your legs or other structures of your body. There are muscles that you are going to be using differently, and it's not just going to be contained to your feet. So don't be surprised if you feel like, wow, my legs actually feel more tired while I did this walk or whatever. I don't think that's abnormal. I think it's pretty typical to feel a difference in other structures of your body as well. So I would also suggest making sure that you do have a backup pair of shoes as you're kind of transitioning with these barefoot shoes, as you're getting used to wearing them. When you do go out and wear them for the first little while, do bring an extra pair of shoes that you had been used to wearing before, just in case. If your feet are feeling too tired, if something is feeling wrong, just switch your shoes back to your old shoes. So next, think about the surfaces that you are walking on or standing on and how much cushion may be required. We are often standing or walking on very hard surfaces, concrete, pavement. We've got sidewalks, we've got hardwood floors, we've got laminate floors, we've got tile floors, we've got all sorts of flooring that we are often spending a large chunk of our time on. And that is a lot for our body to deal with, a lot for our feet to deal with, especially if we are not used to it. So do not be surprised if your feet have a hard time with that. I even have a hard time now standing on really hard surfaces, and I will use things like anti-fatigue mats. I will use one of my more cushioned shoes, or at least make sure that I have a shoe that does have an insole, particularly if you are someone who is standing a lot during the day while you are trying to transition to barefoot shoes. I would maybe look into some of those options that maybe don't have a true like barefoot cushion, but they do have the zero drop heel or a very low drop, and a shoe with decent toe space. I also try to be mindful and seek out different textures, different types of ground to walk on if I have the option. So if I have a choice between concrete and grass, I will pick grass. If I have a choice between a dirt path and a pavement path, I will pick the dirt path. I really love trails that are covered in like pine needles. I find those ones are really comfy for walking on. There's also like beaches with sand. I find those different textures can be working your feet in different ways. And I even seek out like shapes. Like I like to walk on pine cones. I like to walk on round things just to get my feet moving a little differently. I would also say do not underestimate insoles. So I have tried taking insoles out of some shoes because some barefoot shoes are kind of designed to be used with or without an insole. And I have also tried adding insoles into barefoot shoes. And I would recommend both, honestly. So the adding I have done to boots to add extra heat retention for the winter. I just got kind of oversized insulated insoles and just cut them out to the size that I would need for my boot. And I did find that that helped with the temperature that I was able to keep my feet in the boot. You could also add an insole to a barefoot shoe just to add a little bit of extra cushioning for comfort. Again, particularly if you are standing for long periods of time or walking for long periods of time. There's also an insole that I am aware of called Bridge Soles by PR Gear. And the support in this insole is designed to gradually wear away to help to ease a transition into a zero drop shoe. The barefoot shoes that I have tried without the insole, I will say you will notice a lot less cushioning, but it may help with the fit of some shoes. So there is a shoe that I have that it's kind of on the smaller side for me, and so I did take the insole out. It just helped with the fit a little bit. I would suggest really being careful with taking out the insole, especially in the beginning, but it may be an option for you at some point with some shoes. I will also say that different barefoot shoes have different treads and different cushioning amounts. amounts. So not all of them are equal. I noticed like the first shoe that I tried, the Vivo Barefoot all-weather trail shoe, I found the tread and the cushion of that made the shoe fairly easy to transition to. A year later, got the Belenka Trail Walker, and I also got the Vivo Barefoot Primus Light. And those two shoes, even a year later, I had to kind of transition myself to wearing those shoes because they were way, way more minimal than the other one. So don't go into barefoot shoes thinking that they're all gonna be the same for a transition. You may need to transition to different barefoot shoes, even if you have already worn a barefoot shoe before. Another thing is I would highly, highly recommend seeing if there's places that you can try barefoot shoes on in person. You may end up ordering a bunch of shoes online that don't fit. So I would really advise, if you have the option, trying them in person. It may limit your options greatly, but it also will help you to know what works and what doesn't for your feet at that time in terms of a fit, because they're really not all equal. Just like any shoe, I think, is kind of a gamble when you buy it online. I also would advise looking onto Facebook groups. There are some barefoot shoe like buy sell trade groups. I would also highly recommend Anya's reviews as a resource for finding barefoot shoes. She's got lists of different shoe companies that are making them. She's even got a list of barefoot shoe brands in different regions of the world. So I would highly recommend checking that out to see if you can maybe find a store somewhat close to you. So for this next part, I'm just gonna run through the shoes that I have tried and the shoes that my partner has tried, and just give a few little notes on these shoes. Just this may be useful for some people. My partner has tried two Vivo barefoot shoes, the Vivo Barefoot Manga Forest Escape and the Primus Trail 2 Firm Ground. He likes both. I think the boot he likes a little bit more for hiking. He'll sometimes wear it walking, and it is a tie-up shoe, so that's kind of annoying sometimes, but it does fit him really well. It's really comfortable. He has noticed that with both of his Vivo shoes, the lace, like right here, it's hard to see because this is black, but this first lace part will sometimes dig into his foot a little bit, and it just needs to be kind of really finessed to not do that. But that's kind of his main gripe with them. Zero shoes, the Prio running and fitness shoe, he has also tried. He also wears quite regularly. He just doesn't like the need to tie them every time. They're kind of annoying that way. The toe box is a little bit small. I would also agree with that. I also have a pair of those. Mine I'm just keeping as like indoor gym shoes, so I don't wear them a ton. And he's also tried the Merrell Men's Trail Glove 7, and that was his first like barefoot shoe. Comfortable, good first shoe overall, but it did wear out a lot in the sole of the foot and the tread. And that is something that a lot of the reviews seem to also show. So durability wise, not the greatest. Like, he has pretty much gone through parts of the shoe where it's basically unusable at this point. And then for me, my first shoe, the Vivo Barefoot Primus Trail all weather, really liked those. The only problem I have is that there's a few parts of the shoe that I've worn really badly, and a few of them, like, it didn't take long for that to happen, but overall super comfortable shoe, super easy to get in and out of. I really like the no tie shoelaces, but they do feel like they could break really easily. They haven't on me, partly because I just wear my shoes a little looser and just slide them on. Not that that's the best thing to do necessarily, but they are when I want to put shoes on quickly, those are the pair I go to. So the Belenka Trail Walker, I love that shoe. It's super, super comfortable. The first time I tried them on, I was like, these are probably the most comfortable shoes I've ever put on. I didn't buy them initially, and then I went back a few months later and I was like, nope, I think I need to buy these shoes. Like, they are so, so comfortable. And they did take me some time to adjust to, because the cushioning on those, the tread on those is quite different from the Vivo Barefoot Primus trail, all-weather trail ones that I had tried. I also got the Vivo Barefoot Primus Light, which I bought the men's fit of because it was a little bit wider for the toes, and overall they fit well. I don't like that I have to, for both the Bielenka Trail Walker and the Primus Light, I have to tie them, which is just a little annoying. I know it's just tie your shoes, but I just don't like the extra step of doing that all the time. And the shoelaces for the Bielenka Trail Walker are so short, which is kind of handy because you're not like tripping over them all the time, but like they're almost just the right size to be able to tie them just barely. The Zero Shoes Alpine Snow Boot, I have a pair, my partner has a pair. I prefer the look of the black. I really don't really like the white and the purple, but I had no choice where I tried them on from, so I just bought them there. I wanted them as soon as possible, and they are really, really comfortable. Like I said, I did put extra insoles in them and they still had room for that. I feel like the toe box feels a little bit bigger than the Prio running shoe. They don't have like a really good grip for ice slippery surfaces. So I do have to put on like cleats when I'm walking around. So there are a few gripes that I have with barefoot shoes right now, and those are mainly cost and availability. So cost-wise, they can be quite pricey, they can be quite an investment, and especially when you don't know what is or isn't going to work for you, it can be a bit of a money commitment. If you truly do transition to barefoot shoes, you may find that it is hard to go back. I don't think I can just go back to wearing regular shoes anymore. Like I had mentioned earlier, that knee pain that I got from standing for just a few hours with these shoes that had a little bit of a heel, I felt it in my knees. My partner had also worn boots one day that were not his barefoot style shoes, and after walking for like a day, not even a day, like a few hours, he noticed that he had back pain for like days afterwards, just because his body had not been adjusted to that type of shoe anymore. You have to kind of be prepared to not be able to wear other shoes at some point. And I don't think that's necessarily like a truly bad thing, but it does kind of suck for cost. And another thing that really bothers me is there is a lot of inconsistencies among brands, even in just like how they talk about things, the terminology, what is barefoot. There's even things like the cushioning aspect, the sole and the tread aspect that I do think are so important to really point out those differences. Like I had mentioned, for myself, I felt huge differences between different shoes, and you can't just allow people to like go into these shoes without giving them a heads up that like it is a different experience depending on the insole that you're using, depending on the type of shoe that you use. I find like a hiking shoe with a hiking tread may have a little bit thicker of a tread, maybe a little bit easier to transition to than something that is really, really minimal. There can be some that have variants in like toe boxes. I've seen some people on like Reddit who have tried different certain brands that used to be good and now they're not good anymore. Their quality has gone totally down. But despite my gripes, I think I am stuck with these kind of shoes because I do feel better wearing them. My feet overall feel pretty good. I'm more aware of my feet as well and like taking care of them. And I think ankle mobility has also improved for my partner and I. And the only thing that changed was switching the shoes. So overall, we feel pretty good wearing these style of shoes. And I feel less good if I wear a shoe with more of a heel, for example. So I think this is the way it's gonna be now. Let me know if you have tried barefoot shoes, if you're hoping to try barefoot shoes, where you're at in terms of barefoot shoes, if there was anything in this video that was particularly really helpful for you, if you have any tips for anyone who is maybe starting out with this stuff, if you have had any sort of experience with this stuff, questions, any of that, leave it in the comments, and I hope you have a great day. Thanks, take care, bye.